By the end of next month, we could see a rise in the charter school cap if lawmakers decide to act on the issue. Charter advocates have been able to draw thousands of people to the Capitol lawn both this year and last, with some of the largest rallies that we have seen in Albany in recent years. Last year, Governor Cuomo came out to the rally, not this year, but he, along with Senate Majority Leader John Flanagan, do support an increase in the charter cap. However, it is still unclear whether the Assembly Democrats can be convinced to lend their support. Joining me now in the studio to discuss is Kyle Rosenkrans. He's from the Northeast Charter Schools Network, and Ingrid Knight. She's the parent of a child attending charter school in Buffalo. Welcome to Capitol Tonight.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Capitol Tonight.
Thank you.
So we have a lot to get to, but first I want to start with Albany, then we're going to get to a lawsuit that you are involved in. Well, everybody here at the table, with the exception of myself, is involved in. The charter school cap, we've discussed it before. Right. We're not at the limit anywhere, is my understanding, right? I mean, the governor wants to rise this by 100, and yet you're still pushing for this to occur. I'm not sure that's still your top priority, but you can let me know why.
Well, the issue with the cap is the fact that there are all these arbitrary rules about, at the end of the day, how we extend more choices to parents. You can only have so many charters in New York City and then so many charters outside. You can only have so many charters in each authorizer. So the issue, we've actually hit the cap with the SUNY Charter Schools Institute schools in New York City. That's a problem. This is a nationally recognized authorizer, one of the best out there, and they can't issue more charters. So we have hit a cap there. There are some left under the SED authorized charter schools, but we've run out of SUNY authorized charter schools, and that's a problem.
So I thought the last time we talked that the major push that you saw in terms of getting something, at least in the budget, was capital funding for charters. Right. And that didn't happen.
No, and that's actually, I hope we talk about the lawsuit.
We will.
You know, now that we've concluded the budget portion of session, there are still a whole host of issues to get to that aren't even really fiscally related, and they really all come down to parent choice. So it's how can we increase the number of charter schools in New York City and across the state by way of the cap. The Education Investment Tax Credit is also looking to extend choice. So it's really a conversation now about how do we make policy changes that will create more choice.
So Ingrid, you're in Buffalo, correct?
Yes.
And Buffalo, we talked about it on the show before, but in terms of the public schools, is having some difficulty, to be politic. I mean, your daughter is 8 now, is that correct?
Yes.
So she's been in charter school since the beginning of her educational career. Since kindergarten. So why did you go that route? And also, is it a relief to you as you look around at what's happening in the public school system to know, even though charters are in fact public schools, a little bit outside the norm, that she's not subject to what's happening with the school board, for example?
It is a relief. Giselle did start out in a pre-K program in a traditional district school. In that school, it did go up to 8th grade. But as a parent who was constantly in and out of the building and volunteering, I quickly saw that it wasn't an environment for those upper grades that I wanted for my child. There were issues with class size and control and administration that I wasn't comfortable with at all, to say the least. So that's when I started looking for another option for Giselle. Looking at charters, not really looking at private because I had no idea how I would ever pay for that. So we found Elmwood Village, and it has been a great option for Giselle. She's learning in an environment that really supports her. A community environment. The kids are made to know from day one that they are responsible for their community that they create.
So it's interesting, you bring up the Education Investment Tax Credit. The governor was recently in Buffalo. He was with Cardinal Dolan. He was also on Long Island. And then just yesterday, he made this tour of a yeshiva and 4 churches in Brooklyn where he's pushing this issue, although now it's called the Parental Choice in Education Act, right? So it has a few more bells and whistles. Effectively, it's the education tax credit with some changes. That's his main focus, clearly. I mean, he did bring up charters when he was talking about it. He brought up school choice, but he didn't necessarily focus on the cap, per se. I mean, was that disappointing to you? And what's going to get done in 15 days, now 14 and change?
Right. Well, I think we had a long conversation about the cap in the course of the first 3 months of the year. So, no, it's not disappointing. I think that it shows a commitment to parent choice in the many forms it can take here. So, you know, we're still optimistic we have to lift this cap or get rid of it this year. And we have to increase the number of choices to parents. And there are a number of ways to do that. Again, what happens at the end of this 15-day period will be unclear. Our main goal is just making sure that there's an increase in the number of choices available to parents in Buffalo, in New York City, and everywhere else.
What about the possibility, and this was brought up by a fellow charter advocate of yours at an event in New York City, I believe, that New York City mayoral control and the re-upping of that, because it sunsets in June, should be tied to raising the charter cap? I mean, do you support that kind of linkage?
If that helps pass the charter cap, or lift the charter cap, absolutely.
Yeah, what if it delays New York City mayoral control because the Assembly Democrats won't go along with it?
Well, we have no issue with mayoral control. I think it's been an important change, and they're actually talking about it in other cities across the state.
Like Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, we want them both to pass. It's just a matter of what happens in the final compromises that get made by legislative leaders.
So we did allude to this fact, there was a push, and Kyle and I had spoken about it during the budget, to get this capital funding, and basically also to increase funding per pupil reimbursement by the state for charters writ large, right? And that didn't happen. So you're party to a lawsuit on behalf of your daughter, and you're looking for more equitable funding. The state argued, or has argued, which is kind of interesting, that charters don't need extra funding actually because they're doing so well with what they have, and oh look, their scores are even higher than the public school scores. What is your feeling about, well, first of all, why did you get involved, and what's your feeling about the argument the state's making?
I got involved because as an involved parent at Elmwood Village, I started looking at issues that affected our limitation, and quickly found out about the funding issue. And just philosophically, I could not believe that as a tax-paying citizen in New York State, and my daughter attending a charter school that is a public school, that she did not receive all the funding that the state gave for her education. I just couldn't believe it. And the reasons given still have not satisfied me. So when learning about what Northeast Charter Schools does, and that there was an opportunity for me to speak up and get involved in getting equality for my child and for all the children in the district, I jumped on.
It's almost, though, that you're a victim of your own success, is it not? I mean, that's effectively what the state is arguing. You're doing just fine with what we're giving you, so why should we give you any more?
Right, and I think, to me, it goes back to when charter schools were first introduced here in the state. Remember, the last time lawmakers had a pay increase, it was in a compromise measure to get the Charter Schools Act passed in the first place. In the course of doing that, there were a lot of compromises made, and particularly around this funding formula. In the time since, we've shown what we can do. So this, to me, is more of a question of imagine the potential of what we could do. If we're doing this with the current funding system that is inequitable, that is unconstitutional, imagine what we could do with equal funding. That's what this case comes down to.
Does your school have plans, in fact? I mean, are you aware of what they would do with more funding?
Certainly. We would do things that would give our kids the same opportunity that district school students have in their state-of-the-art buildings that they spent over $1 billion on refurbishing just in the Buffalo district. We would add science room space, equal computer lab space, library space, performance space.
So none of that exists right now.
The list goes on.
None of that is available at this point. No. So what's the timeline on this? As I mentioned, there were arguments, and we're waiting for a decision. I mean, if in fact, would you have withdrawn the lawsuit if in fact you had gotten some relief from the state in the budget? Well,
I wouldn't speculate on that. I think our primary consideration is fix the inequity, whether it's by legislative means or through the courts. We just want to see a solution. And so we expect a decision within the year. But remember, we are at an early stage in this case. The state is asking basically to dismiss Giselle's case, just dismiss all these parents before they've even had a chance to argue the case in court. So what we're just asking for is a chance to prove this case up and get past this first stage. So we expect a decision within the year. If there's a legislative solution to this problem, it would obviously make the case moot. And so we'd be very excited about that, I think.
And to be clear, who's paying for it?
My organization is. We're the Membership Association for Charter Schools in the state, and we're pursuing this case.
Well, we're following it. We've actually reported on it on this show, and we will continue to do so. I thank you so much for coming in, Ingrid. It's a pleasure meeting you. Kyle, we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Liz.